Excellent introduction. And it's my pleasure to meet such an international audience here today. It's very wonderful. And so basically a little bit about who I am and what I do. I come originally from mining. I started in German coal mining with an apprenticeship a long time ago and worked in different industries and all the time studying and also actually teaching. Basically, I've got a PhD in entrepreneurship, but I also got an MPhil in sustainable management of SMEs from two UK universities. So I work at the interface of enterprise and sustainability. And as I created two small businesses myself, one in France, one in Finland, I've worked very closely with practice for many years in different countries. I mean, for a long time, I lived in France for almost 13 years, and I worked in Scandinavia. I did some work in Germany, also in the Netherlands, a bit in Asia. So I'm quite sort of interested in what the people at the base, what they think. And I always find, like what actually Jorge was saying, that there is a disconnect that basically policymakers, they're making policies, it's all super interesting, but I often have one or the other actually talking to those at the base who do the job, those who are the entrepreneurs. And I got very angry at some stage because I mean, passion drives us as well. And I got angry about the growth perceptions in the media. I've been reading different media, and it was all like, we need more growth, 500%, 600% from one year to another, and talking at the same time to the entrepreneurs. And in different places, it was like, well, actually, it's not just about numbers for us, it's about other things. It's about well-being, it's about love, passion, what we do. So I got intrigued. And at the time I was actually living in Finland. And basically I was also working at a University of Applied Sciences. And I organized some seminars with the MBA students. And again, I got very intrigued. I got absorbed in the culture. And I developed, with the support of the institution, a research project. And at this time, I also met a colleague, also in Finland, Professor Paul Upham, and later in London, Richard Blundell from the Open University. Paul is at Leuphana University in Germany. And basically, so the question emerged, how do Finnish entrepreneurs conceive of growth in relation to basically their businesses? And as I'm quite a qualitative researcher, but I work with people who are actually also interested in the quantitative side. But I said to myself, I want to know from the practitioners, from inside their heads, I want to basically pull out what and how they perceive growth. So this insider perspective was very important to me. I developed a 3-tier methodology, basically bringing together a postcard survey, a LinkedIn survey. Then I organized a roundtable with entrepreneurs and some case studies. So I brought all of this together, and what did I find in a nutshell? Basically, there was a very strong theme of social embeddedness of business activity. A lot of growth had to do with emotions, with love, with passion. A lot of growth had to do actually with learning, and a lot of growth was about well-being. And that was really, very interesting and quite sort of, for me, groundbreaking. And as I said earlier on, I was actually started this research because I was angry, because all I found is like business as usual, talking about business as usual. We've gone through all these crises, financial crisis, economic crisis, COVID crisis, but it's still business as usual, capitalism as usual, although there are pockets in different countries where people are questioning whether it's really got to be business as usual. But sometimes I feel that innovative thinkers well, people think like, oh, they are dinosaurs. You know, they're not part of society. So, but anyhow, so there are different trends. On the one side, we see basically that more and more people think, well, capitalism, capital, the idea of capital has multidimensional perspectives to it. So growth must be also multidimensional. So there are these people who see that. On the other hand, there are also a lot of people who still think, well, business as usual. So, so there's tension. There's tension in the system, no? And obviously, because I work at the interface between entrepreneurship and sustainability, maybe I feel the tension even more, because clearly there is a need to grow, a need to basically make money, to employ people, to have the right turnover, the sales. So there is this there, but at the same time, well, as I said before, basically talking to the entrepreneurs, I felt that nobody was really asking them what's happening, how they perceive this. There is this desire to grow. It's just taken for granted in our society. And so I looked at the growth literature, and I found there was a lot. Many hundreds of articles, academic articles, but also professional articles. And what I found, there is actually a little focus on the qualitative side of growth and why we want to grow, and even less on the practitioners' views on growth. So it's basically the academics who basically impose, it feels like this at least, their idea of what growth got to be. And they don't ask those who are actually growing, who are creating startups, who are growing their businesses, what it means for them. I found a few studies, in a very early one by Wiklund and some colleagues in 2006, who also looked at this issue in Sweden. And they found that small business managers also involve feelings in growth. So that was really interesting to me. And there are also researchers who said actually the standard methodologies like surveys, the quantitative positivistic focus is not enough to understand what's going on. So some researchers have basically pointed out that we need to get close to practice to bridge this gap between the practitioner's reality of growth, definitions, perceptions, and the academic economic abstractions. And that's a real challenge. So because I work at this interface of entrepreneurship and sustainability, I'm very interested, of course, in sustainable entrepreneurship. And what I found in that literature is not much. I found actually 2 studies, relatively recent, that basically have looked at different growth stages. And I've also found another one that basically looked at the growth strategies of environmental social enterprises. So it's quite interesting. So there's not much really at the moment, at least available. What we have, however, we have seemingly 2 incompatible discourses. On the one hand, the dominant green growth literature, where smaller enterprises and startups, they're part and parcel of sustainable development. On the other hand, we've got all this talk, the literature as well, some good stuff, of course, on decroissance, degrowth economics. And also, I mean, I've worked with colleagues who basically promoted the idea of no growth, which I find difficult, but that's my personal view. So the underlying theories for this particular research, the sustainable entrepreneurship side, of course, I looked extensively at the growth firm literature. And there's an approach that I've been working with for many years, which relates, well, which was developed by somebody called Schotter. And Schotter promotes the idea that we should look at certain phenomena. In this case here, the entrepreneurs and growth from a thinking from within or witness thinking approach. It's basically about trying to get into their heads and trying to understand how they perceive growth. And I've been doing this over the years with creative tools. Sometimes in my teaching, I've used theater tools, collage, I work with artists, I use mindfulness. And here in this particular study, I actually developed a postcard survey with a symbol symbolizing growth. It was a staircase to heaven. And so I was trying basically to promote this idea of witness thinking. At the same time, maybe you are familiar with the French sociologist Bourdieu. I was using his theories on habitus, social capital, and practice in this research. I used them also for my PhD, which already focused actually on the role of social capital in French entrepreneurial startups. So I'm quite familiar with these theories. So I bring all of this together in my research. And then the research question was, how do entrepreneurial practitioners conceive of growth in relation to their businesses, and what other concepts do they associate with the concept of growth, and what inferences can be drawn in terms of the nature of sustainable entrepreneurship from conventional entrepreneurial understanding of growth. That's the methodology. So basically, I had a postcard survey, as I just mentioned. I had a LinkedIn group survey, quite small surveys. No? I had a roundtable. I had semi-structured interviews. Following up the roundtable, everything was transcribed. And also I could only basically speak to one other key stakeholder at the time, who was an entrepreneur, but part of a business support organization. So I had different phases, and the transcripts of the different, and the analysis of the different data basically helped me to come to a thematic analysis, template analysis. I compared and contrasted across cases, and I made quite significant conceptual development, all as part of a grounded theory process. Well, because I was working with one colleague who is also very, but he's also quite quantitative. I'm the one, I get a transcript of an interview, I go through it line by line, word by word, I'm interested in that. I want to feel the data. And he was actually contrary to that, working with Atlas TI. Quite interesting, so he quantified. And it was interesting how complementary this approach was. And the first, basically what you see now in front of you is a representation of how these MBA alumni, they were all entrepreneurs, perceive growth. And basically what this is the analysis from the postcard survey. I chose this way of showing it because it's very graphical. And we find here clusters. The first cluster is around the rational understanding of growth, which is about money, profit, sales. It needs to be measurable. It's about portfolios of products, having a market share, increasing, quite standard. Then on top of that, we see, well, it's also about emotional growth. It's about being positive, having the desire to grow, having almost a need, an intrinsic need to grow. Interesting, I thought. That's very interesting. And then I found on the right-hand side here in the mind map that growth was related to learning. It was related to networking, to having a vision, and mental growth, and this idea of reaching out. And the entrepreneurs also pointed out consequences of growth in terms of change. That was interesting. So I thought, so there is more to growth than just the normal, rational, quantitative understanding. I found that really complementary because I thought from the talking I had done with the entrepreneurs, I felt like there was something missing in the normal literature, well, in the literature I had read. This then here is a LinkedIn analysis, LinkedIn survey analysis. And in the pie chart, you see basically that we identified data relating to economic growth, so the quantitative side again, turnover, revenues, sales, clients, profitability, investors. On the individual growth side, it was about making things better, the services better, the products that you're offering better, the quality would be better, improving one's reputation, having this individual entrepreneurial growth, learning, having this persistence, the intellectual growth, that would seem to be very important to these entrepreneurs. But growth was also related to context. Growth was identified as, well, relating to this culture, Finland, Finnish entrepreneurs. But they also felt, and it was interesting, growth was almost like an obligation. Growth was about keeping standards high, but also considering the family welfare as a priority. Very, very interesting. And growth for the long term. So it's not just this short-termist thinking that we often have sort of in the media, but it is actually being in there for the long term, which is also, again, very interestingly related, of course, to sustainability and well-being of society. There were critiques of growth, and that's interesting again. Some of the entrepreneurs were saying it's about greed, it's about too much, it's about black and white thinking. It's about this idea, either you grow or you don't grow, and they felt that was wrong. Some quotations, because I had a lot of qualitative data, so I put just a few sort of the quotes together of what these, in particular, actually the quotes come from the roundtable and from the case studies with the entrepreneurs, from the interviews. And there was clearly a lack of emphasis on growth as just being about quantitative measures. And there's one study from 2006 that basically had found something very similar. And that was a Swedish study I'd mentioned earlier before. So just looking at this quotation here, this guy, and I anonymized, of course, everybody, he said, of course, we grow by numbers, but I'm not just interested in them. I like numbers, but the driver is somewhere else. It's to provide good products, sorry, that we are really proud of. That's now getting interesting. The idea of being proud of something. And that brings something to the whole environment that we're working in. Like a sushi bar, for example, that changes the whole sushi industry. So it's very interesting here. So yes, the numbers are important, but the driver is somewhere else. The idea of being proud of what you're producing, very nice. The emotions that come out in this statement, and that you're changing also something in your context, in the industry. A bit more, I've got an interesting one is also that I found actually a lot of references to personal growth and learning. And the personal growth was related to the company growth. And as I said there, when we met the last time, so I had met this person several times, growth for me is about learning. So if we don't grow each year, that means that we have not learned anything compared to the previous years. Growth is what keeps this business interesting. So it means the growth idea is very intimately linked to the founder. Now this is actually a family business, so that is also an interesting case in itself. There's a very strong red thread in the research that growth is about human aspects. It's about quality of life. And here, one of the entrepreneurs, he said, we keep the human aspects involved. We enhance the business model in the way of life. We don't do anything that we don't feel totally comfortable with. If we would not enjoy it 100%, we wouldn't do it. It wouldn't be good enough. So we see here, it's very important that he feels that they stay human in their business. It's about humane aspects, feeling comfortable in your skin when you're doing business. It's about enjoyment, passion, it's about love. And again, I didn't feel when I was conducting that research, or before when I got so angry, that we write enough about this, that we have enough emphasis in the media on this, whether it's academic or just more popular media. The role of social capital, a little bit about this, because we often read about networking. Social capital is a very popular term, and these entrepreneurs, it was quite interesting. We did an atlas, so a statistical analysis of whether the term networking was used an awful lot. And it only actually was used 8 times in all the transcripts. Yeah? So that's interesting. But at the same time, they used other terms like contacts, connections, people, friends. So they were building their world that would help them to grow. But they wouldn't talk about networking. Actually, they were quite critical. Like one of them here said, I've never been a very big enthusiast of networks. It's because I've been networking all my life without any active participations. Huh? And then he followed on with this, and he said, people who know me are a lot more than people. No? So it's more, he has a connection with these people that he works with. So just networking for the sake of networking, he said, I'm not interested in that. There's something deeper going on there. So it's not about basically an instrumental. People around him are not just tools for him. They're not just resources. There's more. And I found that interesting. And these entrepreneurs are obviously embedded in a community. There's Finland, there's Helsinki, wherever they were located. So this creates, sorry, also an interesting context. No? The other aspect that came out, the importance of collectivity, and in particular the family. So one of the quotations said, well, family, that's a huge thing for me. If you don't get supported, then you really weak at work. So, and this particular person was really, he needed this embeddedness in this collectivity of the family in order to prosper in his business efforts. Interesting, again, as an aspect to consider. In conclusion, I mean, the paper will come out after the 20th of July. It will be published in Business Strategy and the Environment. So it's much longer. There's a lot of much more data in there. But to conclude, the findings basically challenge this oversimplistic distinction between sustainable entrepreneurs and conventional entrepreneurs. Because I've been organizing roundtables in different countries, different places with economic, social, environmental, and also spiritual entrepreneurs, I was always intrigued by that people, we always like to put categories together, but they share a lot. They share a lot. So it's actually oversimplistic to basically create these categories. I understand that humans, we want to do that, but so basically the entrepreneur's experience and the practice here incorporates conceptions of what's called the good life. And that's closely connected to environmental sustainability. I've got the reference of Rosa and Henning here, which is quite recent. A collective dimension was shown to the way that firm level growth is perceived, and it is lived in a collective way. And it also, this research gives us additional insights into the entrepreneurs' understanding of growth as having softer aspects like well-being, like emotions, affect, and passion. And clearly, our intention with this research was to provide a practice-based, a practitioner-focused approach to understanding growth from their perspective. So it's much more qualitative what we found. And this is interesting, but that leads us just basically closer to say, yes, there seems to be a gap between practitioners' growth perceptions and official growth descriptions. Overall, we've got excellent quantitative measures, but not necessarily growth. So what this seems to suggest is that what brings economic growth is maturing of the individual, promoting emotional, personal growth, learning, and enjoying what you do. There is a role for the collectivity in all of this. We also need to question, maybe because it was conducted in Finland, maybe there is a contextual interpretation of growth. So maybe if we take it over, transfer it to the UK or France, Norway, Sweden, I don't know. Maybe it will look different. Or Japan could be interesting, or China, or Brazil. No? What I found as well, because we're educators as well, what about when we talk about growth in startup and small business development courses and in other courses, strategy courses, we don't talk about the emotional side. And that is really quite a neglect, I would say. So that's basically, I think these are my final words about this. I also would like to, as I said, acknowledge, of course, that Paul Upham from Leuphana University and Richard Blandel from the Open University, that we've been working on the paper together. And as I said, it will be published later on, and you've got the title here. Okay. So any questions?
Perfect. Thank you very much, Rita. I'm going to stop recording now. Yes.